Hello guys, Fred here from Pro Tennis Trader. I hope you're well. In this video, I'm going to provide you with 5 ways of avoiding losing money in tennis trading. Now these are 5 approaches which I incorporate into my trading day in, day out, and over the long term, prove invaluable to avoiding losses and essentially boosting my profits. So let's jump straight in. Number 1, take note of first set stats. Now if you've watched many of my videos or taken any of my courses, you will see that I mostly enter into trades in the second set, as not only does this give me a much better value, but it also means that I have a whole set to monitor how the players are performing. And not only that, we have flash scores to provide us with the most important stats relevant to a player's performance. So my major point on this one is that, in my opinion, you should never enter a trade in tennis trading simply based on scoring or on pricing alone. Yes, the score is important, i.e. how the first set is won, and of course pricing is very important as it reflects the value we are getting, which I'll come on to in my next point. But we need to look at how a first set was won or lost and pay attention to the major stats. Now, just because a first set was won, say 6-love or 6-1, this does not necessarily mean it was a whitewash dominating win. It could have been just as close a match as a match won in a tiebreak or 6-4. You've got to look at how the points were won and the stats. So let's take a look at the match of Krejcikova and Pavlyuchenkova in the final of the French Open. Now you can see that Krejcikova won the first set 6-1. So you might think to yourself, she has dominated this match. So you may well be thinking to yourself, you're not going to bother with this one. But if you go through the stats and the service games, you get the true picture of what went on in this first set. So we can see here that Krejcikova was broken on her first service game, but this is the final of the French Open, so we can take into account nerves, etc. Pavlyuchenkova's first serve, she was also broken, but it actually went to deuce, and she was much closer to winning her first serve than Krejcikova was. Krejcikova held for her second service, and then Pavlyuchenkova was broken again on her second service, but again this went to deuce, so this was by no means a dominating and easy break from Krejcikova. Krejcikova then held for her third service game, and then Pavlyuchenkova lost her third service game, but this was more of a convincing break. And then Krejcikova went on to hold to take the set, but as you can see from the scoring, this was no walk in the park, and although it's 6-1, you can see that actually Krejcikova had to put up quite a battle to win this first set. And then as we move on to take a look at the stats from this first set, we can get a clearer picture of what was going on in this set. So first of all, we can see Krejcikova on the left hand side, she actually had 3 double faults. Pavlyuchenkova had no double faults, although compare this, she had no aces compared to Krejcikova had 2 aces. First serve percentage, Pavlyuchenkova actually was higher at 70% versus 57%, but Krejcikova won more of these first service points. Now if we scroll right down to the end, you can see unforced errors, where actually Krejcikova had 9 versus Pavlyuchenkova at only 6 unforced errors. So this again illustrates that it was not a whitewash dominating win, and perhaps there is an opportunity to get into the second set and back Pavlyuchenkova. Which was exactly what I did, and in the second set, Pavlyuchenkova took this set 6-2. Now you can see from the scoring, again, this was no walk in the park, which just again shows how close these players were, considering the first set was won 6-1. Now if we compare this match to the match between Cilic and Basilashvili, Basilashvili only dropped 1 service game in the first set, so on the face of it, this looks like a much closer match than the Krejcikova-Pavlyuchenkova match, but actually it wasn't, and Cilic dominated this first set. And you can see from the scoring how Cilic dominated his service holds. And as we move on to the stats, you'll see that Cilic had 8 aces and only 2 double faults, and 100% of his first service points were won, compared to 62% from Basilashvili. And as you have a look down towards the bottom of the slide, you'll see that Cilic won 83% of his service points, compared to just 56% from Basilashvili. Now this clearly demonstrates once again why it's so important not just to take the score or the pricing alone. You need to look at how the points were won and also look at the stats. Number 2, only trade when you get value. So what do I mean by this? Basically, you should only trade when your risk versus reward ratio is looking positive. So always be aware of what your downside is, i.e. your potential loss versus your upside or your gain. Now this point can be demonstrated perfectly in the match of Alcaraz versus Struff in the French Open. Now Struff took the first set in this match and I wanted to back Alcaraz in the second set. However, Alcaraz only hit a price of 2.12 at the beginning of the set, so I decided to sit this first game out to see how much movement we would get. As it was, the movement from the hold was small, taking his price to just 1.98. Now this is not good value. The risk versus reward from this pricing is not good enough to enter any trades, as a break would give us much more of a disproportionate loss than a service hold would give us in terms of profit. Now when Alcaraz was broken, we saw his price drift out to above 3.0, which proved my risk versus reward decision to sit this one out to be correct. So this demonstrates that by only ever trading when you get value, you can avoid making losses. Number 3, be cautious when there has been a tiebreak loss in the first set. Now again, going back to my first point, I will nearly always enter my trades in the second set, and often this will be backing the first set loser using one strategy or another. Now, one important thing to always consider is the psychological impact of a player losing the first set in a tiebreak. Sure, this may be a signal that the players are very evenly matched, but it can and often does take its toll on even the top tennis players when they lose in a tiebreak. This is because they have put so much into it and come out with nothing. Now over time, when you get to watch certain players, you will spot the signs that signal when it has taken its toll, and also pick out certain players which this affects more than others. Now the points to consider when deciding to back a first set loser from a tiebreak in the second set are these. First of all, how long was the tiebreak? Now the longer the tiebreak, potentially the larger the emotional impact. Secondly, how far along in the tournament is the match? Is it a first round match, or has the player invested a lot into this tournament so far? And this brings me on to my next point. How invested is the player in this tournament or the match? Now believe it or not, some players will in some tournaments turn up for the sake of it, and if they happen to do well, they will continue. Or they may actually have their eyes on another tournament which starts before the current one ends, which they would rather be involved in. Yes, this really does happen. And fourthly, you should always take into account their physical and emotional response to the tiebreak loss. Now some players really do wear their hearts on their sleeves, and you can spot the signs that it has affected them very easily. Now Ostapenko, for me, is one of the favourites for wearing her heart on her sleeve. So to close out this point, if the player has lost the first set in a tiebreak, if you take the time to explore these points I've given you, it could very well save you from a loss if you decided to trade the second set and of course lose. Number 4, holding on in a trade too long. Now this is a common mistake in any type of trading, where a trader will just hang on in a trade far too long because either it has gone against him already and he's looking for a swing back, or is in profit and holds on too long to see it turn against him. Now this is the classic fear and greed scenario. Now the situation I would like to present to you is a very clear-cut one, and is a very effective way of reducing losses over the long term. Now let's say very simply you have backed player A in the second set after they lost the first set. You have just backed him before he served. Now the game has now gone to deuce. No big problem. He's still looking like he might take the game. He goes advantage and then back to deuce. Now it is advantage to player B and now back to deuce. Now my advice in this situation is to hedge out of the trade at the second deuce. Why? because you are now at the stage of the service game where this is no longer trading. This is gambling. There has been a clear signal that player A is struggling to close out the service game, and you have been presented with a generous opportunity to hedge out for evens or even a tiny loss. Just take that opportunity. Sure, you might miss out on some profit if he goes on to hold, but this is a gamble, and we are not gamblers, we are traders. Number 5. Chasing the big swing. Again, greed can rear its ugly head when a trader spots an opportunity for a big swing. Now let's say the player you are backing has got a break up in the second set and confirms that break. You will have seen a nice swing already and see money on the table. Now in many situations you'll gain more of a swing by holding on in the market until the set ends. However, this is not always the case, and in some situations if you hold on until the set end, you may, in some but not all situations, get less of a swing and less profit. And these situations where the player you have backed does go ahead but then struggles to close out the set. And although perhaps wins the set, the market has lost confidence in that player. Now let me give you an example by going back to the match of Krejcikova and Pavlyuchenkova in the French Open final. Now I was backing Pavlyuchenkova in this second set after she dropped the first set. You can see that she got the early break and confirmed the break. So at this point I was happy to let the trade ride the swing in the price movement. Krejcikova then held, as did Pavlyuchenkova again. But then Krejcikova got broken, taking the score to 5-1 to Pavlyuchenkova. At this stage, Pavlyuchenkova's price dropped down to 2.38 from a high of 9.0. So a huge swing in price, and this was very close to the starting price of Pavlyuchenkova's, which is the price you are looking to exit in the second set, as essentially both players are back to evens. So what do? Do you hedge out, or do you chase a potential further swing in price and wait until set end? So let's see what happens. Pavlyuchenkova then loses her serve, but then luckily for you, if you had held on in the trade, Krejcikova also loses her serve, giving Pavlyuchenkova the set. However, this late break on Pavlyuchenkova altered the market's confidence in her, meaning that her price was only at 3.05 from the high of 9.0. So actually, in this scenario, you'd been better off hedging at 5-1. In some matches, it is not uncommon for a player to lose a set from going 5-1 up, and there is nothing more disappointing than to go from having a huge profit on the table to a loss. So, be realistic about the swing you are chasing. If the price of your player you are backing has got close to their pre-match starting price, then consider if realistically there is much more potential for a further swing, or whether it is best to take the money. So to avoid losses or missing out on more profit, be realistic about the swing you are chasing. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit like and visit my channel and subscribe for more videos. And if you'd like to begin your journey into tennis trading, then please visit protennistrader.com, where you can sign up to my free online video course, An Introduction into Tennis Trading. I'll see you soon.